goose talking in my ear instead of getting this look like.
Hello friends, welcome to our 4th week of On The Vise at Montrose Anglers. Glad you guys can be here. Really excited about today's show, and you know, as we've said in the past, we're here for you, and the way today's show is going to go is we've got a featured fly tyer that is going to tie some patterns at the end of each pattern. We'll have a short Q&A, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A. So if you're out there watching us on YouTube, I want to say hello to you guys. Let us know you're out there. Let us hear your questions. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, man, I am really excited about our guests that we have today. You know, it's kind of cool. Obviously, we're all about fly fishing here at Montrose Anglers, but you know, we look at a bigger thing, and that's really community. That's why we're here. And today we get to apply some of our core values as a company. Obviously community, education, but quality products. We're committed to bringing you quality products and quality products from Colorado-owned companies. So we're excited that our feature tyer today is our Umpqua Southwest Rockies rep, Alec Gerbec, and Alec does a great job for us, bringing us the best in patterns and leaders and lines, and he's here today to share with you some of his other multiple talents. You know, he's got a lot of experience in this industry, 8 years guiding in Alaska, 4 years in Seychelles and as a head guide, and his whole career started down in Durango. Went to school at Fort Lewis, got on it as a guide down there, and got introduced into competition fly fishing, and was on a Fly Fishing Team USA for 2 years. So, you know, in addition to today's tying session, we're going to go down to the river about 1 o'clock, and if you're around, we'd love to see you at the Main Street Bridge. He's going to go and show us some Euro nymphing techniques, but right now we're going to go over and see what he's got for us. Thanks, Alex, for coming, man.
For sure. So yeah, as Nolan said, you know, I have my toes in a little bit of everything in the fishing industry. I am the Southern Rockies rep for Umpqua now, but previous to that I was guiding for about a 14-year stretch, you know, and the roots of it were in Durango, where I started competition fly fishing, and you know, it really taught me a lot about how fish feed and where they like to live. So we are going to be tying a couple different patterns, and what I will say in general about Euro flies is they're more of a working man's fly. There's not a lot of flash and frills going on here. They get down quick, and they're quite durable. So the first fly we're going to be tying today is something I call the PT Perdigon. This is a style fly that has become very popular, the Perdigon. These come out of Spain originally. And the Perdigon means pellet, like a shotgun pellet, so it sinks very quickly. They're going to be coated with a UV resin, so there's going to be zero water absorption, and it's just going to cut through that water column really quickly. Most of the flies that I'm going to be tying today might have quite an oversized bead. A lot of Euro flies, you want to just play with bead size. I might tie the same fly with 2 or 3 different size beads, depending on the water type I'm going to be fishing or the rig I'm going to be fishing. So I like to fish a lot of single flies when I Eurofish, so this is quite an oversized bead. So in the description I have a big bead on there. Feel free to put anything on there. So we're going to be tying it on the XC400 hook. This is something available with Umpqua. Jig hooks have gotten very popular. The idea behind them is that they're going to allow your fly to ride upside down when you're fishing. Just obviously keeping you out of snags, but also just very effectively hooking those fish in the upper lip. So without further ado, we are going to get started. So I'm going to just start with some brown Veevus thread. It's about a 14/0. I'm just going to start my thread here, cut off my tag. PT Perdigon refers to pheasant tail, so it is very impressionistic of one of the best flies you could ever have in fly fishing for trout. So yeah, I've started my thread. Now I'm going to work back to the bend, just create a nice thread base. Okay. I'm going to come back forward. This just allows me to have a nice smooth surface that the materials will grab onto nicely as I'm placing them. The tail, I'm going to be using Coq de Leon. This is a rooster feather that comes out of Spain, actually. These are very popular on most European flies. Essentially, it's a long, strong, shiny fiber. So it's durable, whereas if I were to use pheasant tail, I'm sure you guys have all witnessed this before, after a while, pheasant tail tends to break. So it's a very durable material. So when I want to grab some fibers off of this, I'm going to just select a small amount. I'm going to grab the fibers like this and pull the feather away. Now I know all those tips are lined up, and I'm not going to have to do some shuffle business to try to get them all lined up. So I'm going to switch fingers really quick. I'm going to come in, measure the length of the shank, switch hands, and tie these in. I'm going to give one more peek before now I bring my thread back. I'm pretty happy with that length. So now I'm just going to be touching turns as I come back, and my other hand is just going to make sure that those fibers stay on top of the hook, nice and centered. Now, the tail can start to come down as you wrap closer to the bend. Luckily, with this glue we'll be using, I can always kind of train it at the last minute. So I want a kind of a decently long body. And what's important with this essentially thread body is just keeping it nice and smooth. Once we apply that glue over there, you're going to have a nice, clean, smooth taper there. So I can cut off the existing fibers there. And now I'm going to be using a fine wire Danville gold. That piece broken off. It's funny, with the Perdigon style flies, there's a couple different ways people tie them, whether it's really natural with quills or really flashy. Usually just all smooth body. More and more now we're seeing like wire ribs incorporated into them, so that's kind of what's going to be going on here. So real straightforward now, I am just going to start ribbing my fly. I can stop here and give this about 3 wraps before I'm going to get rid of it. I'm sure you've seen this trick before. Now when I want to get rid of this wire, instead of using my scissors and dulling them out, I'm just going to helicopter it off. And I'm going to just give it a couple more wraps. Next part of the equation is I'm going to add a peacock flash. It's a uni mylar. It's actually one color is, or one side is peacock, the other side's orange. But now when I'm going to put it on here, I have to be aware. If I've created kind of a steep slope back here, and we'll see if I did or not, it is hard to have a nice smooth wrap of this stuff. So always like really manage the amount of thread wraps you're doing up here. And I'm actually going to switch my thread. So I'm just going to give a couple whip finish turns there. Get rid of the brown and bring in kind of a standard orange or burnt orange. So with this two-tone mylar, the color that I want to be showing when I start twisting the collar, I want that facing down. So I'm going to tie the orange up facing me. Just catch it with a thread wrap. Okay, and pause here. Now here comes the trick. We'll see how I did. And you can kind of use your fingers to help you move it forward because it just wants to keep going back essentially. Okay, I think I've accomplished success. It crept back a little bit on me, but that's okay. We're gonna go with the flow. You get what I'm trying to do. So now your fly is pretty much done tying. I'm gonna do some glue work and some paint work here at the end. So you can see my tail is starting to arch down. I can just kind of train it up a little bit, and then when we apply the glue, it's gonna help it kind of keep its place. So I'm going to whip finish this off. I'm going to trim my thread. Now, since we're trying to accomplish a pretty smooth body here, it's very, very hard to cut your thread all the way flush without now applying glue and you have a little spike sticking out. That's hard as nails. So carefully, I'm just going to bring a flame in there and try to just bring it down a little bit. It's never perfect, but it's going to singe it down a little bit, which will make it a smoother process for you. So now I'm going to come in with the UV glue. I like to use a brush style. And I'm just going to get some glue on there, and then I'm going to use a toothpick to kind of maneuver it around. Toothpicks are a great thing to have at the vise, and that I can't tell you how many of these I've just ruined because I've lazily just kept letting stuff get on there. So I like to use this just for picking dubbing, use toothpicks for glue, and then I can just throw it out when I'm done. So now I'm just going to come in here and smooth it out. It's also nice, the toothpick has kind of an absorbent to it, so as I'm smoothing it, it kind of pulls off that glue, that excess glue that you don't want. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that glue job. I'm going to come in here and zap it. In general, the taper of a Perdigon is, or the body size is quite thin. You might see some there, it almost tapers to the same size of this as the bead is back, but I just find I want a thin profile in general. I'm able to fish tailwaters that typically people are fishing really small bugs with a Perdigon that's a little oversized, as long as the body profile is nice and thin. So yeah, I've got a nice base here. Now I want to create a little wing case on these guys. So the one challenge I have is I have a slot in this bead that I've got to cover so it doesn't just kind of absorb all the paint I'm going to put on there. So I'm just going to come in with one more, I need to grab a little bit more. One more dab of UV. Just kind of let it settle in a little bit. You might need to brush it back. That way it fills in the hole, so when I apply the paint, it's going to be nice and smooth. So last, as far as the black goes, I could have used just a black UV. That product's out there now. I have had consistency issues with it fully curing, just with that pigment in the glue itself, so I prefer just to use a nail polish, and it seems to be pretty durable. So we'll make a plug for Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails.
Can't go wrong with Sally.
That's right. Sally's been in the fly tying business for a long time. So now just really carefully, I'm just going to apply a little black wing case. It doesn't need to be perfect. If it's lopsided, it's fine. It's probably going to get chipped off anyway at the end of the day. But so yeah, now I've just got a black wing case, kind of that orange collar, peacock, real collar, and then that brown thread body. One thing I will say is when you apply a UV over a thread, it tends to darken it up. So kind of keep that in mind as you are now adding glue and what color thread you'd want to choose. So anyway. Quick and easy, very, very effective. As you know, the pheasant tail fishes very well. We've just created a more durable version that sinks a little faster for you. You guys have any questions at all?
What size notebook was it?
Oh, excuse me, that was a size 16. Again, sky's the limit. You can do that in most sizes. I typically will fish Perdigons quite small. 14 would be my cutoff. Once I start getting a little bit bigger, I'd rather have a bigger profile fly in the, you know, grand scheme of things anyway. So, but yeah, that's a style you are going to continue to hear. People are using them like crazy now, not only on Euro Nymph setups, but dry droppers, standard indicator rigs. It's a very, very good way to dry dropper fish, in that it's going to cut that water a lot quicker than a traditional fly. So very good choice to use there. So yeah, that's the PT Perdigon, short and sweet. We will move on to a bigger fly, not much bigger, size 14, but it's going to be kind of a hybrid, guys. So it's going to have kind of a glue coating on the back half of the fly, and then kind of a soft hackle dubbing front. So we're seeing a lot more of this where places are kind of demanding a bigger profile fly, bigger rivers or off-colored waters. So just take me a second to get some of these materials out.
You used the Sally Hansons to make the wing case, but you had to fill in that gap with your resin. What about just making a nice little wing case with true resin and then taking a black permanent marker?
Marker is also a great way to do it, for sure. Just kind of a dealer's choice there. Again, with all these flies, there's no rules. Bead size, you know, attack it. The original Perdigons, they just used super glue. They didn't even use UV. They felt like that glue actually went all the way through the material, so there's absolutely zero water penetration. So a lot of the guys will still prefer that method. Let's see, I've got a hook, got a bead, got the flash, got the thread. I think we're there. Okay. So I'm going to be using the XC400 again. This is going to be in a size 14. It's a very proven hook shape for a jig. All of Team USA loves this exact model hook. It's just been very consistent over the years. Okay, so again, quite an oversized bead, dealer's choice. I just fish a lot of single fly, Euro nymphing this time of year especially. These are very effective in sinking. So yeah, size 14, that's a 4.3 millimeter tungsten bead, and I'm going to use a red 6/0. Just going to come in with a couple turns, lock that bead in place, get rid of our tag. And now just create a nice thread base all the way to where I'm gonna kind of end my tail. In general, with these barbless hooks, just imagine where the barb would be and try to stop there. Again, gonna use a Coq de Leon. This one is a natural black. Has a very cool kind of peacocky bronze color to it. So if you see these ever in a shop, definitely pick them up. It's a very cool color. Again, I'm going to just kind of separate some fibers. I'm going to grab, hold, pull away the whole feather, and the tips should be all lined up for me. Come in, measure the length of the body, switch fingers, tie it in. That's going to be a great length for me. So now I'm paying a little bit more attention as I'm coming back, touching turns. Bringing it all the way back where I stopped my thread base. And come back forward. This fly I call the Juggarnaut. It's something I've been working on the last 2 years. I'll probably submit it here soon as a signature fly. And yeah, it's been very effective. The body is going to be purple, but you can see I'm using a red thread. I'm going to use Krystal Flash to wrap over it, but being a translucent is going to give it a very unique color. So something you guys, if you decide to tie this fly, play around with that underthread color, and whether it's this fly or another one, very cool way to kind of make a fly unique. For a while I was tying with a yellow thread under the purple, so just kind of play with it. Purple has definitely become a lot more popular in flies in general, as you guys have seen. Who knows what the next color is going to be, right? Let's bring yellow back or something. So before I actually do this body, you can see I haven't tapered it very much, so I am going to make kind of one more pass. It's going to come back 3/4 of the way, come forward, come back about halfway, and pause. I'm going to find about 3 fibers with purple Krystal Flash. I'll line up the tips. And I'm going to tie them in up here. Okay. So 2 ways of doing this. I can start here, wrap all the way back and then forward, or I could tie this down with red thread all the way back and then bring it forward. That's going to really, you know, that's how you're going to accomplish as much red or as little red as comes through. So I want to dampen the red a little bit. So I've started it up there. And now I'm going to start wrapping these back, again, touching turns. And with Krystal Flash, once you put tension on it, it straightens right out. So it's quite nice. I come all the way back to the tail and now start working forward. I'm going to bring it kind of straight up to the bead. That stuff will be hidden anyway, but it's just a cleaner transition to work with. Again, three or 4 wraps. Lock it in place. At this point, I'm going to be gluing the body. Either I can, you know, whip finish and cut, or just whip finish to kind of keep it out of the way as I place that glue. Oh, again, I'm just going to kind of come in, get the general amount of glue I want on there, and then come in with my toothpick and kind of evenly distribute it. Good enough. The reason I'm doing this is just to create a more durable body. I could use a wire wrap over it without glue. It would do decent, but wire tends to shift around after a while, so I'm just gonna kind of keep this style. And a nymph with no rib, it still works, I promise. Okay, so we're starting now the front, kind of more traditional dressed fly with materials. I'm gonna be making this a soft hackled fly. And in general, you know, that's essentially the next step, but I'm going to put a small little dam of dubbing to help prop up that soft hackle, just so it's not glued to the sides of the fly as it's gotten wet. So I'm just going to come back now. I'm going to use a black dubbing. Squirrel would be great here. Your favorite black dubbing, essentially. Today I'm actually using legal seal's fur. It's just really buggy, it's really coarse, so it sticks up well for you. But any material is going to be fine there. So just dub a very small amount on. And just create a little dam. Wrapping kind of right on top of itself, so it's quite tall. Then I'm going to use a hen feather. I would say probably the most popular, and what you're going to see on the next fly I tie, is a CDC collar. Nothing against it at all. I kind of wanted a different style soft hackle, and hen is a beautiful thing. So I'm going to come in, just pick a smaller feather. I'm going to tie the tip in first, so I'm just going to kind of brush back some of the fibers and use that absolute tip as a good tie-in point. Okay. So get a couple of good grabs of that tip. Trim away that tip. Get it out of there. It can be frustrating when you continue to pull out the feather, so I'm just going to give it a few extra wraps. And now, quite simply, I'm going to make 1 to 2 turns of the hen feather. Now you can see it's kind of a little bit going all over the place. At the end of the day, I'm going to put now a dubbing collar in front of it, and that's really going to help train it back. So yes, you can sit there and really tease it back and be gentle for sure. I'm tying these as quickly as possible because I want to make a lot of them. I'm going to lose them. I don't want to have a lot of heart and soul left in that fly, So if you get really attached to a fly, you're not going to fish it as hard, I find. So just a little page out of my book for you. So a little clump of more black dubbing here. Noodle it on there fairly tight. And now before I start really getting serious, I'm going to just make sure I grab some of those fibers that were sticking forward and pinch them back just so they all kind of heading in the same direction. Ooh, got away from me a little bit. Okay. So I've used a red thread here. I'm really going to try to create a collar, kind of a hot spot, if you will. So I did one whip finish. I'm just going to establish with a few more thread wraps and then come in with one more whip finish so you have that nice red collar. Now up to you. You can see that's quite buggy. You can come in here and now trim away some of those fibers to clean it up. So I'll do that, but I like kind of the leggy look, so I'll keep some of those stragglers a little longer than usual. There you have the Juggarnaut. Very effective, kind of looks like a little bit of everything. I like to fish a lot of dark flies this time of year, so this is going to be a good one. I will definitely be using it in the clinic.
Any questions out there, guys?
It's the kind of the beauty of these things is they're really straightforward. They're very manageable. There's not any super serious technique to them to like where it's a head scratcher. So it doesn't hurt my feelings you guys don't have any questions. This might just go quicker than expected. So.
Any stories on your name?
The Juggarnaut, the first version I tied to this was on a size 16, and I had a giant bead on it, and I was like, this thing looks, I was just kind of throwing names out there, and that's how it just kind of landed with Juggarnaut. You'd be surprised how hard it is to name a fly. It's a good one anyway. I guess one thing I want to point out, we can just take a quick second, is signature flies in general with Umpqua. There's a lot of mystique or mystery about how that happens and, how flies get in there. And, let's just take a second to kind of talk about that. Every year we receive many, many new submissions to Umpqua feather merchants. It's awesome to see these creations come from all over the country, even world, from tyers that have been doing it for a very long time to maybe someone that tied for 2 weeks and they thought this was the one and they've sent it in. It's just really cool to see all the different creations. And so, how it works is you don't have to just be the most famous fly fisherman out there to get in our book. We have plenty of people that no one's heard of, but we're looking for unique designs. It's very hard to accomplish a unique design anymore, as you know. Things do get recycled. The beauty of what's going on out there is there's lots of new materials. So the more new materials come out, the more chance of kind of creating something unique. So yeah, we look at these submissions throughout the year, and then we determine roughly around September, October, these are the flies that are going to be tied for next season. So everything that's just arriving here in January, I already know what's coming for next January. It's really cool to have all these things kind of in the book. So all those submissions, we get the recipes, and then we send them overseas to our factories in Sri Lanka, Laos, and Thailand. At that point, they are actually going to now tie some counter samples for the signature tire to approve. Sometimes they nail it. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 back and forths from the factory before they get it right. So at that point, once it's approved, the ladies are going to tie a minimum of 40 dozen, and then the shops will make orders, and we'll adjust those by as we see fit. Signature tires, they're going to get a percentage of every fly sold, so I think it's about 7%, and it's really worth it. I know as fly fishermen, we tend to try to keep a lot of secrets in general. Don't be too proud of getting free mailbox money, I will say that. It's quite worth it. So if you guys have any questions throughout this about the kind of the process or factory questions or anything like that, I have a lot of knowledge there, so I'd be happy to share it with you guys.
How many flies does a person need to tie and submit for consideration? Is it just a one-off, or do you have to send in?
We definitely want to see some consistency in your tying. So on our website, we actually have a very cut and dry, this is how you should submit. By no means do we want a shadow box with all sorts of literature behind it, but a recipe and a consistent kind of 6, I think it is. I might be wrong, don't quote me, check the website, but and the different colors that you want it in. So it'd be, let's say, 6 purple, 6 red, 6 yellow. And then, yeah, we kind of take it from there, and it'll go through a number of meetings so the whole committee can see it, and there's about 10 people that look at the flies in these committees.
When was your first one?
This was 2 years ago. I submitted the Alflexo crab, and this is one of the kind of more popular permit crabs out there now. While I was guiding over in the Seychelles, I arrived to this incredible fishery and a large number of permit, and in a 10-month season they'd catch 10 to 15, and I just was not having that. So I was like, no, like, you guys are doing something wrong here. So they're all very accomplished guides and tires. It just needed to be worked over a little bit. So, there was definitely a crab out there. It was called the Orvis crab, very similar with that same body material. But we wanted to keep tweaking it to be what we wanted to be the most effective fly. So it was absolutely kind of a guide team collaboration to get the finished product of the Alflexo. Every week we would come out with a new version and test it, and it would swim upside down or whatever. Like, you just had to keep tweaking. So yeah, after a while it was no longer a secret. We had 10 months of guests coming through, seeing that fly, catching permit on it, so the word was getting out. It was time to submit it. So yeah, that was submitted to the Umpqua about 2 years ago, and it's been a very successful fly. So from there, I just continued to kind of submit saltwater flies. That's really my wheelhouse in creativity, and I feel like that's still a place for a lot of growth in creativity. I'm still working on a nymph that they're going to accept. Even though I work for Umpqua, they still decline my flies, believe it or not. So nymphs are very difficult, but they're big money makers. So yeah, I have one dry fly for trout. It's called the resting caddis. Check it out sometime. There's some time videos up. I'm not going to do it today. We're kind of staying more on the Euro style thing, but yeah, it's a fun process. If you do submit a fly, don't feel bad that you got denied. It's just the way of the world. Charlie Craven gets denial still, so don't feel bad. Okay, so the next fly I'm going to be tying is going to be the soft hackled carrot, and this is a signature fly with us, a non-soft hackled version by Mike Sexton, It's one of my favorite caddis flies. It's more traditional in that it's a fully dub body. It's going to have an orange rib, which is pretty unique to it. And yeah, I have just found it to be one of my go-to kind of anchor flies, one of my heavier, bigger flies that I'm going to be fishing. So I'm going to be using the same hook, the XC400. This is going to be a size 14 fly again. And let me just get some materials out. Feel free to ask any general fishing questions to Alaska, Seychelles, Durango, anywhere in the world. Very, very passionate about fishing. It's pretty much all I do.
That flexo tubing that you use where do you get that? That's hard to get.
It is hard to get. That was one of the biggest painstaking processes, especially when you're in an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. So it's funny, like we had to have guys sourcing it for us while we were there, and then they'd bring like a 1,000-foot spool to us. So like we had more than enough. It is an electrical wire conduit, so like computer wires if you want to bundle them and kind of clean them up. Where we first saw it was actually in one of our Yamaha motors. We were pulling it apart and we're like, oh my gosh, that's the same tubing. So we started putting 2 and 2 together, and we found a company online, Wire Care, that has it in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And of course, then we went through the process of ordering it all because we didn't know what the right size was and everything. And finally we nailed it down. It's, you know, I traditionally use a 1/4 inch diameter flexo. So yeah, the process is never ending with that fly. Okay, so let me get this going here. Size 14. Again, I'm going to use quite an oversized bead. This is going to be a 4.3 slotted tungsten bead in copper. I'm going to be using a black thread. Get a couple turns in there. One thing I will say about tying too is it's all up to you. There's a lot of books out there telling you techniques and stuff like that. Definitely take those into account, but whatever works for you. This is a big point of contention I hear all the time. I put down my scissors a lot. I like to work with materials with both my hands without being kind of cinched up. The particular scissors I like are a Timco scissors, and the holes are really small, so like I get locked into them and it's really hard. So don't feel bad. At least I don't feel bad if I put down my scissors. So I've created that little thread base. I'm not going to be super concerned about making it smooth or touching turns because it will have dubbing over it. I'm going to go back to that natural Coq de Leon. I'm going to determine how many fibers I want. Okay. Then again, just pulling away the feather itself. Okay, measure the shank of the body, place it where you want. Switch hands. That's great. It's pretty easy to get too many tail fibers. That's something I will, tell you guys to pay attention as you start tying these things. Just really pay attention. It doesn't take a lot of tail fibers to get the profile you're looking for. So yeah, we're good there. Just gonna reinforce with a couple more thread wraps. Cut off the rest of that feather. Okay, I'm going to bring this now back to where I finished the tail. Don't worry about the tail at the moment. And now I'm going to add what I'm going to use for ribbing. There's a couple ways of doing this. I could just take out a single strand and tie it in and just use it like I would a wire. I'm going to tie this in and create a dubbing loop with no dubbing in it, just so it's two ply and it'll be nice and durable. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to double this over, a couple wraps over the shank of the hook, and then wrap over itself wherever I'm going to start that. Bring this forward. Okay, I'm going to take my dubbing tool and I can just kind of put it away for now. Let's tie off this orange thread and get rid of it. Okay. The dubbing I'm going to use, kind of what the original called for, was a Dave Whitlock Red Fox Squirrel blend. That being said, you can just use a regular old hare's ear, it's great. This has some pretty cool flash incorporated into it, so I still enjoy using it. You can find just straight up Red Fox Squirrel dubbing out there too without the flash. It's kind of up to you and how much glitter you want in the fly. This stuff dubs pretty well, nice and tight without too much work. Now I'm going to just come in and create that dubbing body. Stop yourself if it's not going well with your taper. Back up, come back forward. Okay, so I've created that nice tapered dubbing body. At this point I want to reinforce it and create a rib, so I'm just going to give this empty dubbing loop a little twist. Now it's nice and tightly wound, 2 ply, and now I'm going to counter wrap, opposite the way I dubbed. Not only to keep the dubbing on there, but also so it lays it on top of the dubbing instead of kind of hiding in it, so that orange really sticks out. Okay, I'm going to tie off this dubbing loop. Done with it. So yeah, that process I could have just tied in a strand of thread or two and twisted it without the dubbing loop tool. It's just nice and quick, and I like how it works out there. Okay, so I'm going to now kind of go back on myself a little bit, create an area where I'm going to be working and adding this collar and soft hackle. Again, I'm going to create a small dubbing dam. It's not going to take too much of that black. Okay, good. And I'm going to be using now a CDC. So this is going to be a lot more characteristic of most of the soft hackled Euro flies you see out there. Today I'm going to use a caddis dun. It's up to you, whatever color you want. This is just a cool color I found in a shop once upon a time, and it's a great kind of lends itself to not only caddis but still a mayfly. As far as finding a feather, I'm looking for feathers that aren't very sparse and the actual fibers have some fuzz to them. That's what's going to trap the air and create kind of that nice bubble on your fly. Now you could dubbing loop the fibers and tie it in. I'm just going to do a real basic version where I'm going to tie in the tip. Give it a couple more wraps. Fold it back on itself and just make one turn of it. Now you can see those are quite long fibers, so we're going to want to trim them down. Before I do that, I'm just going to kind of tease them back, give a couple thread wraps over the spine of the feather that I polymered with. Okay. As far as trimming CDC, You can knock it with scissors. It's just going to give it a really squared off look, which I don't like. So I'm actually just going to pinch to size and then tear. So it's going to create a little better natural taper to that fiber. And have a look. You can always do it again later or even on the river. And now I'm going to come finish the fly. There you have it. That is the soft heckled carrot. Another version I really like doing of this is an olive body with a chartreuse thread. Again, sky's the limit. Do whatever you want there. Very, very effective. I really encourage using this fly. This is one of the team's favorite flies, confidence flies they use in competition. So there you have it. And yeah, honestly, these are all pretty easy. That's what I wanted to bring to the table. Even with explanation, it only took me a couple minutes, so definitely worth a whirl.
You fish that year round?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Any other
Questions, guys?
Do you ever use wire as opposed to thread for the ribbing?
Absolutely, you can. I enjoy this kind of really bright orange thread for that particular fly. But yeah, you definitely can. If you can find a good wire color, why not?
Okay, I was just curious if it's the UV that you're looking for, the UV material or the UV fluorescence.
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I could see that. That's why I was asking is if you would use wire as opposed to the thread, because the thread has a UV property.
Correct. Anyone else?
So with there being like a ton of different patterns out there, where do you find the creativity and desire to create new patterns?
Good question.
Can I repeat the question?
He asked, where do I come up with the ideas of being creative when there's so many creative ideas already out there, kind of on paper, if you will. Really find your favorite flies, what you like about them, and try to blend the two. That's a really good start. You will find flaws in every single fly, whether it's a copper john or a pheasant tail or a tungsten dart or something like that. And take a piece out of it, man. For sure, that has helped me along the way of creating it, being a little more subtle. Maybe it's way too flashy for me, or that wing I just don't like. It's not the right color or material. So dissect the fly so you can make a sub and take it from there. Yeah.
Can you talk just briefly about the requirements? What are the limitations on flies you can use?
Absolutely. So, and I will say I haven't competed in a couple of years, and the committee that overlooks the rules and stuff is called FIPS-MOOSH. It is constantly evolving. So I'm going to give you as much updated information as I can, but it might be a little dated. So in general, kind of the most basic thing, and we'll cover it today later, is first and foremost, you can't use a traditional strike indicator. You also cannot use split shot, so no additions to your leader at all. Your leader can't be more than twice the length of your fly rod. You can only use barbless hooks. The bead size you can use up to now only a 3.8. When I was still competing and going to like nationals, it was a 4.0, but they have now changed it to a 3.8. And then also it comes down to your location, how many flies you're allowed to fish. There was one Worlds over in Europe, they were only allowed to fish one fly during the competition. Some places like here you can fish 3. So that's kind of the general basis of it. And then how these competitions work is you are given a group of anglers that you're gonna kind of sub-compete against. So your grouping is gonna go to a section of river, and then you're going to lottery draw a piece of water. So you're going to get a random piece of water, and it might be the spot or it might be absolute trash. You're going to have 3 hours to fish it under those rules to catch as many fish as you can in the mouth, and they have to be at least 20 centimeters to count. So this, like I was saying earlier, it taught me a lot about how fish feed and where they live. More often than not, you did not get the hole that you were hoping for. So yeah, suddenly you have this super shallow, fast water, whatever, and you got to make it count. Now, depending on the location, sometimes, you know, the local Rotary Club thought it was a good idea to stock it the day before. So guys in 3-hour sessions are catching like 75 fish. And then the guy downstream, those fish haven't migrated yet. He caught like 3 whitefish. So like, it is a challenge when they do that for sure. So yeah, typically in a competition, there'd be like 4 of those sessions. It could be all river, it could be half river, half lake, it could be all lake. So it kind of depends on the venue. So it's very interesting, and the early years of it, it was very secretive, even amongst the team members, not sharing much about flies or technique. And then what happened is we continued to get waxed by all these other European countries. So we're like, okay, what's going on? Well, a lot had to do with how much they're sharing and also how long they've been doing it for. So the more we paid attention, the more we became friendly. We started learning more about their leader design, their fly design, learning about things like the Perdigon and things like that. That helped us to progress and be very good. So yeah, it's a challenge, time of year. I went to a nationals in Pennsylvania, kind of my second year qualifying for the team. And we get a couple practice days on different water. You can't actually fish the competition water a month before. So we're fishing it and everything's gravy. We've found the flies that we are very happy we know are going to work. That night, a 50-year flood comes in. The next day, we are now fishing the highest, brownest water you've ever seen. So for 3 straight hours, you're fishing off of like someone's lawn, like trying to fish behind a tree to make it work. But something I learned was from George Daniel. He was the team captain at the point. That's his home water. He would just pick a single piece of water and he would just fish it the whole time, just super consistently, just do this. It's really hard to do that. You're constantly marching up and down, the time is ticking. And so yeah, every session, even though the water was 50-year high, he would scratch out a fish or 2. So you learn these little things and you know how to go into the next competition with that. So yeah, one of my sessions, I fished for 2 straight hours. I'm crawling a woolly bugger, you know, on a lawn, literally. And all of a sudden I get a bite and I bring it in and it's a bluegill that had washed out of a pond into the river. Bluegill do not count. I made sure that my judge at least measured it and wrote it down just so it made me feel good. But yeah, you're constantly throwing all sorts of challenges in these things. It's not always so cut and dry. So I definitely encourage it. You learn a lot from it, and good friendships are formed, and you get to fish in some really cool places.
What about size of boats? Is that were restrictions on that?
Definitely. Let's see, what was it? It's like you couldn't fish a super wide gap or anything larger than like a size 6. I want to say something like that. I forget what that exact one was. I would say in general, most guys are fishing nymphs or dries. The streamers I'll be showing you are not, they don't fall within competition rules, so they'd make a smaller version of it. The squirmy wormy recently got banned from competition because it was very, very effective. So they constantly look at it. There's certain flies that, you know, we might look at over here that the Scottish teams have banned from all their competition. So it's pretty dynamic and it's funny to see. America was getting a lot of flack for the squirmy worm, let's just say. So yeah, like time of year too, you might not be able to fish like a hot-headed fly or an egg pattern, which is pretty cool. Okay, coming into the next fly, we are going to kind of transition into a streamer pattern. It's going to be called the Stealth Leech. Super duper simple. And why I am bringing this one out today for you is this is a great tailwater fly. So fish that are super picky and you can't plop a double ganga on their head because they're going to swim 2 miles down the river after you've done that. So this is a technique that the guys have been working on more and more on the team, and it's a technique I enjoy quite a bit, which we'll talk more today on the river. But essentially, you're going to be high sticking a streamer and maybe lightly jigging or bouncing it down the river, as opposed to, casting down and across and stripping back to you. So with this style, you're going to actually stay in contact with your fly the whole time. And you're going to be able to fish a hole a lot more thoroughly many times, as opposed to just slapping something in there and maybe only getting one shot before those fish have turned off from it. So, let's see, I've got a hook, thread, bead, so this is a newer Tiemco hook. I believe last year it came out. It is one of my favorite hooks to use. It's a 708, and I put it in the vise. You'll see what's going on with it. This is a fantastic stonefly and streamer hook. A lot of the jig hooks have relatively short shanks, so you can still tie streamers on them. You just can't quite accomplish what you want to sometimes. So you can see here, it's got kind of an extended shank that goes down. What this is going to allow me to do is bring a slotted tungsten bead up and over it, so it's still going to keel it upside down, and it's going to leave me lots of gape. So just another version of a jig hook, essentially. There's a lot of Perdigon hooks that are coming out now that look like this, but I love, whenever I can, to use a Tiemco hook. It is absolutely the best hooks you can use, highest carbon steel, they're forged, all that fun stuff. So I know I can really winch on them and they're going to stay sharp throughout the day. Another quick fly, guys. Another fly I am not going to be attached to. If I lose it, fine. It didn't take me 30 minutes. Okay, so I've got my thread in there. I'm just going to come in here, a general thread base, back to where the barb is. I will pinch it once I'm out on the water. This fly is so simple, I almost didn't tie it for you, but honestly, you need to just try this fly on fish that are really picky, because they're going to be like, wait, what's this leech doing here? And it's not all flashy and double hooked and all that fun stuff, so doable. Okay, so I'm just going to cut out the tip of a marabou feather. This fly is going to be all black. I'm going to tease the fibers back, and now I'm going to find the length that I want of my tail. So let me just give a couple wraps, take one more look. That's going to be about the right length I'm looking for. I'm going to be coming back, not paying too much attention to touching turns or really trying to get a clean finish there, because I'm going to be bringing a body over it. So as far as tails go on these guys, something I learned from Lance Egan, he's a team member, very well-known signature tire with us, is actually bring your thread back onto the bend just a little bit more than you traditionally would. It's going to eliminate some of the fouling that might happen. In general, marabou is a great material. It doesn't foul for long. If it does, it kind of just collapses back off the hook. But yeah, a great way to eliminate some of that fouling is going to just wrap a little bit further back. So I've reinforced that marabou in there nicely. I'm going to trim it flush to the front. Just going to wrap it down a little bit more. That's fine, whatever. Okay. So here I'm going to create a dubbing loop. Okay, and I'm going to bring my thread forward. I'm just going to stick that in my spring while I get things prepared. So the body is going to be rabbit. So I'm just going to use a zonker strip, but I'm going to take away the hide. Hide is nice and strong and makes it really easy to wrap on a hook, but it also really hinders how your fly sinks. Once it's wet, it's fine, but I'm just going to take it out. So it's going to be a very quick sinker. It's going to dry quickly, so it maybe casts a little bit better. And so I'm going to take the zonker strip and just kind of place it in my fingers like this and tease out the fibers. Being in Colorado, it's very dry, very staticky. So often dealing with rabbit, it wants to kind of just continue to do whatever you do. Just give it a little lick of your fingers or dip it in some water and help train it just a little bit. I'm going to take my chip clip. I'm not going to use any particular names of this product because there's lots of different versions. And now I am going to trim. Where can you see this? Where's good?
Over here, yeah.
I'm going to trim away the hide. Okay. So essentially now I've got the hide off. I can put this in the dubbing loop and make short work of it. Okay, so we've got it in there. Now we want to determine what we want to do with it. The more dead ends or cut ends I have on this side, when I spin, it's going to create a very full body. The closer it is to the thread, it is just going to be long and pretty airy. So I'm actually very happy with that amount. These cut ends are going to just create a subtle bulk. And so now I'm going to twist this. Rabbit's a very nice thing to do a dubbing loop with. It doesn't catch itself quite like some of the other fibers you might put in a loop. I'm going to come in, brush out any trap fibers, and I'll do it one more time once I'm done. So now we're ready to make the body. I'm just going to now catch my thread up, wrapping back here until I've gotten to my material. Okay, so I'm here. Now I could be touching turns as I come forward. That's going to create quite a dense body, but I'm not going to do that. It's such a dark fiber and thick dubbing loop that you're not going to see that underbody, and I can create a sparser fly, helping it sink even more. So not really touching turns, almost like palmering like you would a hackle for a woolly bugger. Coming all the way forward. And now I'm just going to finish with a couple tight turns up front. Okay. Tie this off. Trim away. Okay, at this point, I'm just going to train some of those fibers back, and I want to create a subtle little red collar. That's my only kind of hot spot to this fly, if you will. Oh boy, hold on a sec. There we go. Depending on the bead you choose too, this one actually looks like it wants to come over the eye a little bit. I'll still be able to fish it, but be careful with the big tungsten bead. So I'm going to come in now, tease this out. So I use that red under thread. If it shows a little, fine. That's great to have some red underneath there. But now I have something that literally took me, what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to tie. It's going to sink very quickly. I'm going to cast it upstream and essentially just lightly bounce it down the river, essentially dead drifting just with slight bounces. That fly is going to have so much movement with that rabbit and marabou. It's going to look like a leech. And it's going to kind of allow you to search the depths. This is going to sink very, very quickly. So if you're in that one spot where it's like, man, I really want to see what's down there, I can investigate very quickly with this. Bounce it around, bounce it in circles in the eddy, try it again. And so I have a lot of these. I know I'm going to lose them, a lot of different colors. If I'm doing really well with this black one in a hole and it then slows down, I might change to a white one or a tan one or olive one. super effective. The team guys, yeah, they would just have the competition ready size bead. They might add some lead wrap just to accommodate for some more weight. And then kind of depending on the fishery, they might do something all natural like this, or they might use like a Palmer chenille of some sort to create some flash in the fly. So very simple. Apologize that, yeah, I picked a bead that maybe has a little big of a hole, but you get the idea. This is still fishable. And yeah, the Stealth Leech.
Questions, guys?
Tie that in purple?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tie everything in purple, right?
In general, my favorite, and I don't know what our time looks like. Are we still good for? Okay, I'm going to tie one more fly. I like light colors just because I can see them. You know, that the visual experience of a streamer eat is fantastic. So I try to force it. Sometimes it's not the color to use during that time of year, but I usually try to start with it to see if it works. So yeah, that's the story there, and I really encourage you guys to try this method because now you can fish a really big piece of meat more subtly and thoroughly in a river without feeling like you've made the one cast and now the fish knows.
I was gonna say that the other thing that we've noticed around here, chartreuse works in lakes.
Yes.
But it doesn't work so well in rivers. Have you noticed that as well with this particular? Because I would do that in chartreuse and just tear them up in lakes.
Lakes are a really funny beast. And kind of circling back to competition, that was always the wild card, is learning those things. And everyone's fisheries, I mean, maybe chartreuse works good here. I can tell you it does not work good up north. It's just how it is. But yeah, paying attention to those little things and kind of circles back to you. What is your particular fishery? What's the common theme? They hate silver beads there. They love chartreuse, whatever it is, slide that into your fly design. And quickly you're gonna create a more effective pattern for sure. Okay, well, we are moving on to the last fly. And we can pass some of these around too if they want to see them. The last fly is the most extreme case. It is something I call the torpedo. This one gets down really quick and is very deadly. Come on, someone else has a question. Bring it on.
So you said the size limit for competition fishing was 3.8 for the weight bead.
Last,
You can add lead to your flag besides that, or?
as long as it's hidden. So if you dress over it, absolutely. So you're seeing a lot of new products come out, you know, some sort of like scud back or elongated bead that you can dress over. Those can technically be used, but they will actually use like a little measurement tool on the water to make sure it meets those requirements. So it can be very precise depending on where you are. If it's a world competition, they definitely use it. So yeah, it's interesting, have to play by those rules. There's a new bead that's kind of come onto market now. It's called an Insta-Jig bead, and it's tungsten. It kind of looks like a teardrop. These are actually a higher concentration per its diameter of tungsten, so even heavier than a slotted tungsten bead, but very expensive, but a great way to get your fly down maybe a little bit faster without such a big bead on there. we are offering this year, this is pretty new, a number of commercial flies with that Insta-Jig bead. And a fly, let's say this Perdigon. We're gonna offer it in different weights. So maybe it's a size 16, we're gonna have a lighter version and a heavier version available. So if you guys get into this, whether you're tying your own or you're looking to buy them, just know it's very important to look at the weight, and we want to have that available to you guys. So pretty cool.
Are you guys going to have the bead itself?
We're strongly looking into it, but nothing is for sure at this point.
You mentioned that in competition, you can have a bead to add weight to your hook. Can you use multiple beads?
As long as they're hidden.
As long as they're
Hidden, like underneath dubbing or something like that. So yeah, often if you're fishing a giant river that requires small flies, you're gonna sacrifice one of your bottom fly, your point or anchor fly, as just a bowling ball. Essentially a scud that's got one bead, but then the rest are beads. That's a pretty extreme case, and they probably don't do that as much anymore, but that was something we were definitely seeing for a while. It's funny, the transition of kind of the fly evolution of Euro flies. The very early stages were mostly scud-like caddis imitations. I'm sure you've seen a kind of more standard Czech nymph is dubbing with some sort of shellback and ribbing. The comp guys in general have moved away from that quite a bit. It's a lot more of this kind of mayfly-ish small profile that gets down quick. Those styles came out of the Czech and Polish areas where they have that bug in abundance and they're fishing more off-color turbid water. These small bugs came from France, Spain, places like that where very clear water, very pressured, and don't have as many caddis. So it's been a cool evolution of where the flies have come from. And so in general, having that big nasty scud on the bottom, it's probably not being used as much anymore. Okay, so the torpedo. This is the extreme case of a streamer technique I like to use. Pretty fun fly. Also, again, another easy one. I'm not very attached to it. So I'm going to use a size 8 jig hook here. I'm going to just get a little thread base going.
Kind of hard not to be attached to something that's got so much
tungsten
bead on it.
Oh, I made one quickie mistake. Let me back up really quick. I've got to create a little foundation behind this first bead. Tungsten is expensive, I agree. Okay, so I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time up front here creating a thread dam. And that I need to create a space in between these two beads where I'm going to make a spin of deer hair. So you're going to watch me do a lot of thread wraps here until the bead sits. Don't get me wrong, I love to tie more detailed flies that I love, especially dry flies, things like that, but it's nice to have bugs that you can fish really hard. Okay, good. Okay, so what I accomplished there, I obviously seeded that front bead so it's going to stay there, but now I've created a little spacer here which I'm going to be tying materials on later. So let's get that thread started. I'm going to do a marabou tail again, just pick a nice feather. We're going to eliminate the tip. Take away some of the more scraggly stuff on the bottom. It's gonna be about right. Okay. So I'm bringing my thread back now. Yeah, that'll be fun. Again, I'm going to bring it back a little bit further than I typically would with like a woolly bugger, just to eliminate some of that fouling. I'm going to use a UV gold polar chenille. Nice and flashy. I love the color combo of UV gold and tan. One of my favorite flies, kind of that goldy fly. That's the double woolly bugger. Okay, gonna tie that in. Again, in general, you can see I'm not super technical with my thread wraps or anything here. This is gonna be covered by this anyway, and it's gonna just speed up the process, not use as much thread. So now I'm gonna be touching turns as I come forward to create this nice flash body. And just kind of teasing it back with the E-strap. I'm going to tie out of this polar chenille a little early, as I am going to be actually adding a little marabou collar here. So I'm going to flatten that zone out a little bit. Okay. I'm going to create a dubbing loop. There it is. Okay, and now I'm going to do a dubbing loop of marabou. The only reason I'm doing it instead of just wrapping a marabou feather is I'm going to try to shorten it up a little bit so there's a taper. I don't want my marabou feathers necessarily hitting the end of my tail. I want it to be a little shorter. That's why I'm going to put it in the dubbing loop. So I'm going to clean up some of the bottom stuff. And I've chosen a feather that is kind of much more characteristic of a woolly bugger marabou feather. It's got a lot more kind of thickness to it and maybe not as long and sparse. So it's going to be a great kind of collar feather grade to choose. Okay, so I've used the clip again to grab the fibers. I'm going to trim away the rest of the feather. Looks like that. Grab it in the dubbing loop. Oop. Okay. Again, this comes down to do I really want it long and wispy, or do I want a little backbone to my dubbing loop? So I'm going to keep some of those cut ends on this side. I'm not really going to push them together tight to that thread, so it just has a little bit more bulk. I'm going to spin that. This is also, in general, just going to give you a more durable marabou in your fly. The spine of a marabou feather is quite fragile. So I'm going to come in here, softly pick out these fibers. Okay, so I've got a nice rope of that. I actually created this fly with Cheech and Curtis. We were fishing together one day on the river, and we were playing around with different sculpins and tan things, and we couldn't find one that was quite heavy enough, and so we kind of all walked away with this design, and I love it. Okay. So now essentially what I've done is, yes, I've given the body a little more movement, but I've dampened that flash a little bit, so it's not extremely, it's not a sparkle minnow out there. Okay. I'm going to tie this off, and then I'll pick some of those materials out. Oop. Yahtzee. The polar chenille caught me. So you can see now it's just essentially veiling the chenille, and that's it. Okay, the finishing touch now is just going to be a deer hair head. I'm by no means a pro at spinning deer hair, but what's really cool about tying in between these two beads is it gives it a really natural flare with that hair sitting against this bead, which you should see here in a minute. So I'm going to use some coastal deer hair belly and tan. I find that deer hair belly spins quite well, and usually a pretty consistent product with tips being not so broken. So before I stack it, I'm just going to spend some time cleaning it up. Might even take my little flea brush to it, get some of that under hair out. Now I'm just going to use my large stacker. Okay, before I start applying it, I'm going to give it just one more tease out. It often brings some of that more of the under hair out, or maybe a random hair has crossed up in the mix. Okay, so now I'm going to look at where my hook point is, and I'm going to kind of get a rough measurement. I definitely want it to come over the hook a little bit. It's going to give you kind of a weed guard feel to it. But now I'm also kind of creating this nice sculpin profile. So I'm going to come in here with this pinched. I'm going to give my thread a little spin so it's nice and tight. Now I'm going to do 2 loose wraps, release, and now start letting it do its magic of spinning. This point, just before you rush forward and really start tying this off, just gently make sure you still keep those 2 wraps, but you can kind of push it with your thumb just to make sure you've gotten that consistent, all the natural tips all the way around the bead or around the hook shank. So now I'm just going to start coming forward, reinforcing that hair by kind of getting between it as I'm coming forward, and then eventually jumping it in front of all the hair. So this is now the 2-bit hooker of the streamer world, right? I caught some hair there. So now you're pretty much finished. Just going to come around and give a real rough cut. I'm using the bead to actually help me guide my angle, which I'm cutting. It'd be a lot more difficult to use a razor blade in this scenario, so kind of have to revert back to using the scissors to trim the deer hair. Okay, I'm just going to give it a brush, see where I'm at, make another circle. I don't know if you guys find this, if you guys tie deer hair. I can spend 30 minutes trimming this. I'll fish it for 10 minutes, I'll pull it out, and there's suddenly random pieces that need to be trimmed. It's like, where were you hiding? So yeah, definitely spend some time here, but just know it's going to show its true colors after it gets wet. So a small river like what you guys have here in town, the Uncompadre, this is the extreme. You would not fish this here. The stealth leech would definitely be more appropriate with its weighting and profile. This is, you know, we designed this, you know, on a bigger river. I would fish this like on the Colorado or Gunnison maybe when the streamer bites on. But there you have it. Again, I can keep trimming. I see a piece here, but you guys get the idea. I've created kind of that nice broad and lots of flow in the body, should actually sink pretty well. So yeah, that's the torpedo jig.
I'd fish that right here.
Cool, I love it. That's what I like to hear. I'll try it today then. Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you start getting into just this jig style streamer fishing in general, you always are kind of desiring maybe a little bit more weight. So like, this is the extreme end of what I know I can fish the deepest, fastest of waters. A lot of the times I'm just going to fish a single slotted tungsten bead, maybe with some split chop, or excuse me, some lead wrap. But yeah, sky's the limit. Any color, you could change up the chenille to a ice dubbing if you wanted. You don't have to do a deer head. You don't have to do 2 beads. It's all up to you guys. Just throwing some ideas out there that get the brain rolling.
Questions, guys? What do y'all think?
Thank. Good stuff.
They're unique, right?
Yeah.
It's borderline conventional fishing at this point, you know. I could probably go down to Walmart and buy a marabou jig and fish it the same way, but got to put the 5 tires touch in it.
Oh, there's no fun in that.
I know, right? Well, that's all I got for you guys as far as the tie-in front. So if you guys have any questions, comments about anything to do with fishing, feel free to fire away.
Well, you had mentioned, so I thought I'd bring it out.
The resting caddis.
Yes.
We brought some of those in.
Oh, very
and I
good.
think we can, maybe you can talk about that and pass that around, because I think that would work quite well around here.
Absolutely. So this fly, yeah, if you first want to, put it up there and then we could pass it around. This is a fly I designed when I was living in California and fishing the upper Sacramento, which has a fantastic caddis hatch that happens kind of mid-late summer. A lot of these fish were being quite picky in slow water. So I wanted to create a very realistic profile that's set lower to the water. And I'm using an older technique with the wings called Wally wing. So I'm using bronze mallard and kind of splitting it off the spine of the feather to give it that really cool natural look. Got in the catalog last year with that thing. It's been a big hit. I definitely recommend it. It's not going to be a dry dropper fly necessarily, or unless you had like a unweighted fly behind it. But if you find a very picky fish that's loving on caddis, that thing will definitely do the trick. I do have some videos out there online you can find of me tying it. It's fairly simple. The Wally wing will definitely scare you at first, won't it? Have you done some of them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's actually pretty darn easy once you get a hang of it.
Get a hang of it.
Yeah, there's a couple of tricks in there, but it gives it just such a real look. So yeah, it's tied on a merger hook too, so that butt's going to sag nice and low. I believe that's the tan version. I also have an olive and a dun version. So yeah, that's my resting caddis.
What size do you like to tie that in?
Mostly 14s, I'd say. 12s even, that's kind of what I designed it off in California, was a 12.
Because that's pretty small right there. I think that looked like about a 16.
That's a 16, yeah. That fly is available in a 14 and a 16. The olive one is as well, and the dun is in a 16 and 18.
Great. I think we're gonna probably wrap up. If you guys don't have any more questions, we'll and we're gonna move down to the river. Be down there probably ready. Started about 1 o'clock. We're going to just go right down to the West Main Street Bridge, and we'll be right in that area. Look forward to seeing you guys. And hey, so next week we've got a local guide and fly tyer, Jake Kepler, coming in to visit, to spend some time with us. So come on back. And again, a shout out to Drew Lowen Creative. Great job he does. And we'll see you next week. Huh? Yeah, subscribe. Subscribe. If you like what you see, subscribe. Until next week, tie lines, guys. Go have fun. Thank you.